Welcome to the Reviews Without Remorse podcast with Joe and Dave. Be warned, the discussions in this podcast may contain detailed spoilers. For spoiler-free reviews of newly released films, be sure to check out our show on our YouTube channel. Enter at your own risk and enjoy the show.
Cinema, the final frontier. These are the voyages of Reviews Without Remorse. Its ongoing mission, to explore strange new films, to seek out new stories and new artistic interpretations, to boldly score where no man has scored before. I am a man of logic and science and the first officer of this ship, call me David, and with me is the dashing, daring, Horatio Hornblower captain of the ship, Joe!
Which means I get to talk like this for the whole episode.
Always remember to pause at your pronouns. That's the trick to being a good Kirk. This is episode 173, and in this show we will discuss the Russo brothers' first movie after the incredible success of Avengers Endgame is a soldier's story about drug addiction and bank robbery starring Tom Holland. Trailer is out. Joe and I discuss. WandaVision is here. The first glimpse of the next phase of the Marvel Cinematic Universe is dropped and what? And then, it had been 15 years since the last episode of the original Star Trek series. Joe and I discussed the beginning of Star Trek's return with our review of Star Trek: The Motion Picture. How you doing, my man?
I am good. I am very good, and kind of looking forward to this series coming up. I've kind of been tapping my inner Trekkie for a few months now, so this will be a lot of fun. I
agree. This is. I'm looking forward to this too. I feel like your Trekdom has evolved over the past couple of years thanks to the shit show that is Discovery. Oh, did I say that out loud?
Well, let's get to it.
I'm 23 years old, and sometimes I wonder if life was wasted on me. I take all the beautiful things to heart till I about die from it.
If I could save time in a bottle.
So, first of all, I'm a little sick and tired of people using time in a bottle. How many times do we have to hear time in a bottle? Now, granted, it was a good version of time in the bottle. I didn't really have that much of a problem with it, but like the minute it started hitting in, immediately I'm rolling my eyes and like, oh my God, what a cliche trailer. That aside, this is the first movie from the Russo brothers since Avengers Endgame. And can you believe it has been like is it 2 or 3 years since that?
Wow, has it been? Well, I guess I kind of feel like 2020 was sort of a not like I don't know what you'd even call it, but yeah, I guess it has.
It's been 2 years since their last flick, and this is their first one, and it stars Tom Holland, and he plays an army medic suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder and becomes a serial bank robber after an addiction to drugs puts him in debt. That's how it's described in the Internet Movie Database. Thrilling. I mean, I suppose there's a interesting story to tell there. I just kind of feel like, wow. I mean, talk about it's like here's the Russo brothers. They're truly at the top of the world. They were on this end of the spectrum, and it's like, okay, now let's go to this end of the spectrum.
Yeah. Yeah, it does kind of smell of, well, we did our superhero movies and everybody did well. Oh, what, you want to do an Oscar movie now? Oh, okay. All right, here's the story about a guy. Right, everything terrible happens to this guy. So here you go, Tom Holland. Here's your Oscar movie, and we'll get an Oscar for making it, et cetera, et cetera. I'm just hoping that they'll add some creativity to it. There was a part of me, I kept watching this trailer and sort of looking for the little bit of cleverness and how they're going to do this, put a different spin on it. Almost like I was sort of wishing this was a Taika Waititi movie. I kind of feel like he would have put a much more interesting spin on it, as opposed to just going for straight straight up Oscar bait. But listen, talented people all around, so fingers crossed.
I'm curious, but it's an Apple TV movie. You know that, right?
I did notice that, yeah.
Yep. So, I mean, it's not even like it could possibly get nominated, because of the whole Oscar rules and all that crap.
Yeah, but after this year, I'm sure they're going to have to relax that. I'm sure that whole debate after 2020 has probably been put to bed because they're not putting any movies out at all this year.
Yeah, seriously. I got to tell you, you know what's weird? You know what I'm really looking forward to?
What's that?
Supposedly, an actor that has a decent part in this movie is Michael Gandolfini, the son of the late, great James Gandolfini, who is going to be playing the part that his father made famous in the upcoming The Many Saints of Newark. This is going to be like his first movie that he premieres in, so to speak. He's been in other stuff, but this is like his first, relatively major role. So I'm actually mostly curious about that.
Okay, I could buy that.
Heavenly shades of night are falling. It's twilight time.
Wanda and Vision, aren't we a five-pair?
This is our home now. I want us to fit in.
Oh, this is gonna be a gas!
Where did you two move from? How long have you been married? And why don't you have children yet?
Our story.
I think what my wife means to say is that we moved from...
Moved from where? Married when? Damn it, why?
Oh, Arthur, stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it.
I kind of feel a little... how do I put this? You see, weirdly, that's very symbolic of the show. All right? They're doing this as an episodic show. But yet, the way the narrative is going, I feel like it's exceedingly impossible to judge this show with what we've gotten so far because all we have is a mystery. We don't have a single crack in that mystery. We don't know why this is happening or what it's all about or anything along those lines. We're 2 episodes in. It feels like this show was originally designed to binge so that you can get like a relatively cinematic story in a television format. I mean, I am curious thus far in WandaVision, but right now I don't feel like I can actually review it yet.
No, obviously not. You're absolutely correct. I mean, you can't review it because I believe this show is going to reveal itself little by little. And I have to tell you, this is probably, I mean, put it this way. I'm already seeing the YouTube episodes trying to deconstruct and look at all the Easter eggs and what could this mean and what did the ending mean. I'm avoiding those like the plague because I just want to see it play itself out. I'm so impressed with what I'm getting thus far. I just want to take it in as they're giving it. I don't want any cheats or hints or anything. Yeah, I mean, but that said, honestly, I have to tell you, I really did sort of love this for what it is. And like I said, I have no idea what it is yet. No idea. So again, I'm just sort of taking it in as they're giving it, but I'm really kind of loving this so far. And I liked how, for example, the intro logo in the very first one, you saw how it sort of switched over to this very classic black and white, obviously took you right back into classic television. But then by the second episode, they had already gotten rid of that. And what I thought would be maybe like 2 episodes that were sort of in the same world, you could tell, actually, no. We actually did sort of come forward a few years. And now each episode looks like so far it's going to sort of stand as its own presentation. And I'll tell you one better. I was sort of shocked at how slow I was. When I heard the title WandaVision, I didn't even quite put it together. Like, oh, like television or like WonkaVision. It finally hit me. I'm like, oh, right. So I wasn't really even getting like, oh right, so we're gonna do this. I mean, again, I saw the trailers or so, but I was, oh, now I get it. So yeah, so honestly, I'm kind of eating this up, and I love the subtle hints of, I guess, in-world meta. Like you can tell that Wanda knows something that she's sort of pushed to the back of her mind. I mean, I'm honestly, it took us to the end of the second episode before we got our first hint that there's something outside this world that's happening, and she is trying to sort of make peace with it or not. And I was like, oh, okay, all right, I get this. So yeah, I mean, again, it's like I'm loving it just on its surface level. I love the funny presentation. I love how they're giving it to us in sort of like episodic television, classic television episodes. I kind of thought by the time we were watching the actual magic show was sort of the first time I was feeling like I'm just watching the show that they're presenting us for a little while. I felt like everything else was sort of feeling like it was this meta world that we were just sort of living in. But anyway, I'm really kind of eating this up so far, and I really, again, kind of like how I did it with Mandalorian, I feel like if I had the slightest bit of self-discipline, I would just chill out so I can binge the whole thing at once. But of course I don't, so I will end up just watching them every single week. But I'm getting the vibe like maybe that's how it's intended. You know, we want you to sort of come back every week, watch this like it's your favorite TV show, and because again, I mean, that's exactly how this is sort of pitched. So, all right, I'll just take it as it comes. So, but definitely loving it so far.
I am more than happy to take it as it comes. I don't feel like if I want to say, should you watch it or shouldn't you? If you've watched the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies, you definitely want to watch it. It's nice seeing Vision and Wanda back. I kind of felt like we got shortchanged on the building of their relationship, and I feel like this is going to fill in that missing gap. I love the little Easter eggs, although I think my favorite little thing, and spoilers for people who have not watched the show, my favorite little thing is at the end of the second episode, the guy who came out of the sewer. Did you notice what he was wearing?
Well, it looked like he was wearing like a beekeeper outfit and he was surrounded by bees. Right.
That, my friend, if that isn't like hinting that AIM is involved with this movie, with this TV show, I don't know what is. Because in comics, the AIM costumes, people call their costumes the beekeeper outfits.
Okay. All right. I don't know what that is, but
it just, you know what? When you're done with the show, look up AIM.
Okay.
AIM soldiers, and you'll see that they wear these yellow outfits with these tall little things and like this little black window. It literally looks like a beekeeper's outfit. Okay. So that is the only hint I have so far as to anything that's going on at this point.
Okay. I like that. And I'll tell you, there was probably, as far as tiny little winks and Easter eggs, I did see something in the background in the first episode that looked like it was just a decoration on a shelf in the background, but it looked like the genie bottle from I Dream of Jeannie.
Probably was.
I thought was sort of like a little wink because again, this is sort of like a combination of I Dream of Jeannie or Bewitched, where she's using her magic to make dinner for the boss. I thought that was pretty clever. And then the second one, I can't take credit for it. I saw this somewhere. The box, the big magic box, the design on the box is sort of was the shape of the stone that he had in his forehead. The Infinity Stone. I was like, oh, okay, all right, I got it. So yeah, pretty clever. Again, I'm really just kind of enjoying where this is headed, and I kind of feel like I like the pace. You know, I like that we're not rushing things out. Not every episode is going to necessarily have hints because again, I felt like the first hint of anything I got of a larger world didn't happen until the very end of the second episode. So I'm like, all right, again, I'll take it as it comes. I'm enjoying it, and let's see some more.
travel forward with us, 300 years into the future, to confront the greatest mystery ever to threaten mankind. We are aboard a huge starship called the Enterprise. This is the return of Captain Kirk.
An alien object of unbelievable destructive power is less than 3 days away from this planet.
When an alien spacecraft of enormous power is spotted approaching Earth, Admiral James T. Kirk resumes command of the overhauled USS Enterprise in order to intercept it. Written by Harold Livingston, based on a story by Alan Dean Foster, based on Star Trek created by Gene Roddenberry, directed by Robert Wise, Star Trek, the motion picture. You know, I want to start by saying this movie gets maligned for being too cerebral and slow. And I could completely get that. But I'm going to go on record right here, right now, and say, of all the Star Trek movies that have been since the end of the series, this is the most Star Trek of all the Star Treks compared to the original episode.
I would tend to agree with that, actually. It's funny, now that you said it, I'm like, you know, I think you're right. I would agree with you that probably to fans and sort of moviegoers in general, they would probably all agree that the second one was where they hit their stride. But yeah, in a different kind of way. The second one is certainly a great film, and obviously we'll get to it. But I think you're right that this one does sort of feel like classic TV Star Trek.
Yes, very much so. In fact, so much so that it's basically a remake of the season 1 episode of The Changeling, which was, do you remember that? Nomad, launched from Earth in 2002, was a prototype to seek out new life, and then it combined with another species in like 2267, and so now it was find life and destroy it type thing.
Okay.
And it thought that Kirk was his creator, Dr. Roy Kirk. Remember that episode?
I not too well, but yeah, it rings a bell.
But yeah, but the general plot of it, you can hear, is extremely similar, you know, to this. Now, to give a flashback to the time, this was 1979, and this was literally a response to Star Wars. Okay. Yeah. At the time, Paramount was trying to start their own network, and at the time, Paramount owned the rights to Star Trek. They were trying to start a fourth network. That was their first attempt before Fox came along in the 80s and took that away and gave us Married with Children. But you know what? That's a whole other podcast. The idea was they were going to bring back the original cast, and they were going to start off, and then they were going to slowly pass off from the original cast to a new cast of characters. When Star Wars hit big, Paramount decided, no, we're going to make this into a motion picture, which, you know, as far as titles for movies go, it's a terrible title. You know,
well, there was a lot of that back then. Superman the movie, yeah.
Yeah, that it's weird that they felt they needed to have that distinction. You know, that just goes to show you. I mean, what a lot of people won't realize is that in the 70s and 80s, and even up into the 90s, TV was still a much maligned area of entertainment. So they always tried to make a distinction between movies and TV. So I could see why they would go with the whole, you know, Star Trek the motion picture thing. But okay, but that aside, so let's start with like the first thing that differentiates this from the original series, and you know, it's kind of like, let's just say what it means to have a budget, because the opening scene, they have these beautifully, remember the original Klingon ships in the show, how they were just these shapes and they were like perfectly smooth and stuff like that. Suddenly, the first thing we see is 3 Klingon ships, and they have texture.
Yeah.
And they kind of look, you know, really, really badass. And I like that. And then we actually see the Klingons, and what the hell? The Klingons have gone from blackface to bump heads.
Yeah.
And that was a little, you know, it's funny how it's like the modern fans will take that for granted because that's just what they've always known. If you became a fan of Star Trek from Star Trek: The Next Generation, you've known Klingons have had ridges. Well, that wasn't always the case. They used to look a lot more ridiculous. But this is the beginning of it. This is where they first showed up with their new look, and in a weird way, it kind of sets the tone for the movie. It's almost like they're saying, "Hey, we don't look like cheap sets anymore. We're not using these mangy little visual effects from the '60s. This is the '70s, baby. We got some actual special effects." And to the movie's credit, I found a lot of and the special effects were designed by Douglas Trumbull. He did some work with Star Wars, but probably to me Trumbull's biggest achievement would have to be Blade Runner. I think that the visual effects in that are just, with the buildings and everything like that, is some of the best model work that has been done in film.
Sure.
But honestly, the first thing, once you get past the fact, okay, we are no longer a cheap production, because that was the big thing that people used to say about Star Trek back in the even in the 70s. It's like, oh my God, those sets, you can almost see the walls move, and that silly phasers, they're like drawn in and so on and so forth. Yeah. It's like, okay, now they have a budget, now they have visual effects, and the first thing is, you can honestly say the visual effects in this movie are really, really good, even for 1979.
Yeah. By the way, did you ever see the episode? I don't know if it was TNG or Voyager, but some time travel-y thingy, and Worf is there. They literally time travel back to an episode of Star Trek where they see the early Klingons, and they're all looking at Worf going, what the heck is with the Klingons?
It's like, we don't discuss it. Yes, that is from Deep Space Nine, Trials and Tribulations, one of my favorites.
There you go.
And I will reiterate again, Deep Space Nine is still my favorite of the modern Treks.
Nice.
Yes. And they actually tried to explain it in an episode of Enterprise, I think it was, or something like that. I don't know. I don't remember exactly. This was at the tail end of my, hey, I'm at a drinking age. Maybe I should move away from Star Trek and actually look at girls. And what can I say? Being a nerd wasn't always cool, ladies and gentlemen.
True.
So we meet Kirk and we meet Captain Kid Toucher. I'm sorry. I mean, William Decker. I hate to call him that. I shouldn't get personal with that.
I kind of forgot about that until you just said it again. My God.
I apologize. Kirk meets William Decker. He's getting the ship back. They head on out. They get to V'ger. They find out V'ger is Voyager. The cute bald-headed girl gets killed. I mean, it is a very slow-moving story, but it has a tagline at the end of the movie that says, "The human adventure is just beginning." And one of the things I like about the movie is that it is kind of a human adventure, because it deals with not letting go of your glory days. It deals with trying to become better than who you were. In the case of Spock, wanting to go for his Kulinar training, and it really gave all the cast a nice little moment to shine. But you can see where they would have gone if it had become a series. Decker would have been the captain, and Ilya would have been, and weirdly, that type of relationship did kind of really play itself out with Next Generation, with Riker and Troy. Roddenberry totally refreshed all that stuff. So,
yeah,
for the future. Yeah. It is not an easy movie to sit through, because it is very much in love with its special effects shots, and it's very much in love with its quiet moments of reflection. Okay. Even its like action sequences. It has this one action sequence where, they go to warp and they get pulled into a wormhole. Everything starts slowing down, and all that stuff. And it's like, and I remember thinking to myself, wow, not much of an action sequence.
Yeah.
But as I was rewatching it, I really did appreciate it a hell of a lot more this time around than I did initially, because, weirdly, the next movie, which I love Wrath of Khan, don't get me wrong, but it represents a turning point for Star Trek as a whole and kind of changed the whole original idea of Star Trek. This movie at least still honored and respected it, but it was maybe too smart for the audience, too ahead. It's sad to think that this type of science fiction probably would have been more accepted in the early to mid 2000s, after the Matrix hit and the Matrix started freaking blowing your mind with different ideas of what sci-fi could be and everything like that. Maybe it would have been a bigger hit then. But this movie gets beat on a lot more than it deserves, I feel.
Yes, I will agree with that wholeheartedly. And it's funny, when you were talking about how slow it is, I had flashbacks of hearing people call it screensaver of the movie. and there is a lot of that. There's a lot of just moving through, energy fields, etc. But I'll tell you something that will probably surprise the hell out of you. The last few months, if I am home and I'm working on something and I just want something to keep me entertained, you would think, and assuming I've already seen whatever YouTuber, kind of run, I need something as I'm sort of focusing on something else. Of all the things I could pick from, I tend to pick this movie lately. So when it came time to review it, honestly, I've been watching this movie pretty regularly recently, and I can't really tell you exactly why. I think part of it is maybe I was sort of just in the mood for some sci-fi because I wanted some good eye candy, and I thought to myself, I'm on a little bit of a Star Trek kick lately. And it was sort of, well, which one haven't I really seen? And of course, it's always going to be the motion picture. Because, honestly, after Wrath of Khan and all the others, I've probably seen them many, many times. And I always forgotten about this one. But I have to tell you, honestly, for some reason, I kept putting this one on. And I enjoy it immensely. And I sort of feel that while it is a little slow and it is kind of maligned, I think one of the things it very successfully does, is I think the term world building comes to mind. I sort of feel that this film really tried very hard to give you the feel of the Star Trek universe being something you could just step into. And I even recall, and again, it's a much maligned scene because it's very slow, but honestly, I really do enjoy the scene where Scotty is taking Kirk over to the Enterprise. It's a long scene. I'll grant you, but boy, do I really love just taking a little time to sort of fly around the ship, really appreciate the size, the scale, the scope. The score is fantastic that goes with it. The score for the film in general, I think, is great. And ironically, I think they didn't really appreciate quite how good it was until much later when TNG decided to reuse it as their theme. Suddenly, I think everybody realized, yeah, that was actually pretty damn good, wasn't it? So, yeah, I really do enjoy this movie a lot. And honestly, like you said, it's not an action film by any stretch. I certainly would not call this like a sci-fi action film the way I would Wrath of Khan. And again, I love that movie for its merits. We'll get to it. But this one just has a different vibe to it, and sometimes it really hits the spot, and I really do. The cast, I think the cast still looks great. They're not, obviously as the series progresses, they age pretty rapidly, but here they all look really great. And Yeah, I'm even willing to forgive the silver costumes, which I think at the time, again, it was a little too like, oh, of course, science fiction. Everything's got to be silver. But honestly, looking back at it now, I kind of appreciate it a little bit more. So yeah, I like this one. I almost feel like part of me wants to call it a guilty pleasure, and then the other part of me is like, there's nothing guilty about it. It's a good movie. It's not. I can understand it's not everyone's cup of tea, but I like it.
Dude, that is very well put, eloquently put. I agree with you wholeheartedly, except for one thing. I never and never will like those costumes. There is a reason they were changed and never came back.
It's kind of funny how I do look at it, and they're kind of like these skin tight, almost superhero costumes, except for the big belt buckle. For some reason, there's one big belt buckle in the middle, and it's almost like you keep waiting to see what they're going to use that for, but they never really do. I kind of thought at some point that it would detach and become like a communicator or something, but nah, it's just a big old buckle.
Yeah, that was the thing. I mean, even look at Luke. Yeah. Luke in Return of the Jedi. What's he got? What was that thing that we recognized in The Mandalorian? His big gosh darn buckle.
There you go.
Buckles were the thing for sci-fi back in those days. If there is a fault within the movie, it was trying too hard to be the TV show, and I think that episodically speaking, the TV show worked better because you had the act breaks and everything like that with commercials and so on, so people could catch their breath, go to the potty or something like that. And there's really not much of that in this movie. Because of the filler, it gives the impression that all this is an overlong episode of Star Trek with these little moments of slow flybys and, bring it to 3,000 meters and great music. I am not complaining about Jerry Goldsmith's score here. Do not think that I am. But literally, if it wasn't for that score, people would have been asleep during those scenes. There's just, this movie's biggest fault was it was a response to Star Wars, yet didn't understand what made Star Wars work. And that was the whole reason why they changed everything with Wrath of Khan, which we will get to. So Paramount approved this as a movie, thinking that this is going to go up against Star Wars, and even it feels like even to this day that some people just don't recognize the difference between Star Wars and Star Trek. Star Trek is supposed to be sci-fi with moments of action, and Star Wars is just a space opera. It's supposed to be action. You're not really, what is the biggest joke of Star Wars? Is like, how does the lightsaber just grow to be so high? It goes against all, known forms of physics and all that other crap. And it's a valid question, but this is Star Wars. It's just what it is. Mm-hmm. People have a higher expectation of Star Trek to be at least, try to be scientifically real.
Yes, I agree with you. Right. This is, I've heard it said that Star Wars is science fantasy, whereas Star Trek is legit science fiction. This is a literal prediction where we will be in a couple of years, and I think it works. I'm having flashbacks as you were talking about the pacing and how this is essentially played out like one long episode. And you're absolutely correct. There really is no like first act, second act, third act. It really does just sort of just move forward slowly. We have the mission and we're going to slowly get there. It's an incredibly linear story. And I sort of feel like it plays out that way visually. I mean, essentially it is the whole movie is getting the ship from here to here. It's even when they get to the edge of the cloud, then they go in a little bit, then Spock goes in a little more. Then the end is they finally get to the center. And the whole story does feel like it's just one line. It's again, no breaks. no peaks and valleys, etc. So yes, in that respect, I would agree that the story is kind of incorrect, or just not really done to, it doesn't fill a traditional 2-hour narrative. It is a long episode. Like you said, without commercial breaks. It's funny. I'm having little flashes of. Do you remember? I don't know if you've heard Red Letter Media do Star Trek reviews. I believe it was when they were doing the first Kelvin Star Trek movie, and he was talking about Star Trek in general, and he was saying like he sort of had like a little line, and on one end there's rock and roll, and on the other end there's classical music. He said, and the films that sit closer to the ends tend to work the best. And he said, there's Star Trek, the first Kelvin Star Trek with Chris Pine. This ain't your granddaddy Star Trek. It was rock and roll Star Trek. And it was fun. We liked it. It works. Then you got, on the way other end, you got the motion picture, which again feels like classical music. In the middle is where you get problems, where they're trying to straddle a fence, and you get like an elderly Jean-Luc Picard swinging around looking like an old John McClane. Doesn't quite work. So yeah, you're absolutely correct that while the film it does feel like a longish episode, I still give it a lot of credit, because I sort of feel like it is that good cerebral sci-fi. There's a lot of conversation in here that could have very easily been gobbledygook jargon. I mean, there's so much sci-fi is ruined by these sort of nonsensical, we gotta do the quantum vortex to finagle the phalanges and whatever, but here I like all the dialogue. All the dialogue for me is working pretty well, down to remarks from Spock where he says, V'ger is a child, and and then of course Bones says your child is having a tantrum, Spock. I mean, that to me is all working really well. Like there's no dialogue in here that I feel is sort of throwaway fluff junk. I feel like what's here works. And I really like it. In fact, I now that I'm also remembering when I was younger, this was a movie that I recorded on my tape recorder just to listen to it.
I did the same thing. Holy shit! Maybe I'm gonna contradict myself here. What a great movie to fall asleep to. Such a good. But that was, again, I love the ambiance of this. I mean, I love the kind of world building aspects of it, and this movie does have a great ambiance between just some of the humming of the sound effects and the good score. So yeah, like I said, I just kind of this one is very much a guilty pleasure for me. I don't think you should consider it a guilty pleasure. Be proud of yourself, man. Look at how far we've come. Because I guarantee you, when we were that young, we were like, oh, this is boring.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember too. I'm trying to genuinely remember what I thought of this movie when I first saw it. And I don't remember ever feeling like there was anything wrong with it until all of a sudden I saw Wrath of the Khan, and all of a sudden I was like, whoa, this is great. This is, they should have done this from the beginning, but I seem to recall liking the first one just fine until somebody told me I shouldn't.
Yeah. Welcome to crowd speak there, man. That tends to happen. It's kind of amazing to me. I even maligned it when I was first showing it to Liam, and I was like, oh, this is like the weak entry in the entire series, but don't worry, it gets better. And I was watching it, it's like, I have hypnotized myself, misremembered, or like basically followed along with the crowd. It's like, hey, there's a bunch of people with pitchforks and candles. I guess I should follow them. That's kind of what I'm thinking happened, because this isn't a terrible movie by any stretch of the imagination. I think it's quite smart. I think it honors the original series. I feel the characterizations for all the characters were spot on. McCoy was just as surly and, funny as ever. His, you say your child is having a tantrum, and I go back to the line after he first says that. It's like, well, what do you suggest we do then, Spock? Spank it?
This is the return of Captain Kirk.
An alien object of unbelievable destructive power is less than 3 days away from this planet.
Mr. Spock.
I offer my services as science officer.
Dr. McCoy. Scotty. And joining them on their mission, Commander Will Decker and Navigator Ilea.
I'm sorry.
That you left Delta 4? Or that you didn't even say goodbye?
I will say this. I think as I look back on it now, I think that, again, even though I just sort of complimented the screenplay, I do sometimes feel that the characters are slightly exaggerated. Where we're kind of getting, interpretations of these characters that we know pretty well, and they're kind of playing up their respective roles a little bit. And I remember kind of feeling like, and I get the whole idea that Spock was very close to this Kolinar, which is, like you said, is the ceremony where they purge all emotions.
Right.
But I remember kind of feeling like, all right, Spock is kind of an ice cube in this movie. Like he's just because you are, I guess this, again, it's a Vulcan thing. I don't get all of it, but I get the idea what they're saying. You're purging your emotions, but I don't think that makes you socially awkward on purpose. Like now suddenly he just can't deal with people. He literally doesn't acknowledge McCoy. He looks at him and just looks away when he first gets there. There's that scene where the three of them are talking in the conference room and he's like, Spock, will you please sit down? So it's, I remember kind of feeling like they're like, I couldn't tell, like, are they going a little too far, making him too Spockish, or is this kind of where this character would be? But even McCoy, he's a little too grumpy. I kind of felt the Captain Sarah thing was a little annoying. Like, all right, I get it. He, again, now here's where his character would be after these years of being retired and brought back in. I get it, but it's time, again, is it too much? But other than that, and plus you got Kirk with his sort of, I can't even really call it a character arc because I don't know if it really sort of comes to a conclusion or is resolved, but just the him wrestling with Decker for, control of the ship. Okay. All right. And I kind of felt like that was handled a little bit better in when they got around to Wrath of Khan, because there's conversations in there about you should get back your command, you should do whatever. And I kind of felt like in that very short conversation, they probably wrapped up that whole character arc pretty well, as opposed to just kind of like 2 hours of tension about, who's running the ship, me or you, kind of thing.
All right. I can, yeah, I can see, I can absolutely positively see where you come from. And I kind of agree. Yeah, I suppose that they were caricatures, but I always interpreted that as that wasn't for the fans. That was for the new fans to try to kind of shorthand introduce them to the basics of these characters. Yeah. Kirk is the heroic one. McCoy is the surly one. Spock is the logical, unfeeling one. Okay. And I mean, think back to 1979. It's not like there was internet. It's not like there was instant information. It's not like you could just go to Netflix and put on an episode to get a better understanding of these characters before you go to these movies. There was nothing like that. You had reruns. You were lucky to see an episode or two at best. When a couple of weeks building up to a movie. And I feel that, yes, while they did exaggerate the characterizations just a tiny little bit, I feel like that was done on purpose as a way of introducing these characters to new fans, not just for the old fans. enough to satisfy the old fans as well as give an indication to each new member of the audience who these people are and what their story is. That's what I took it as. I don't think you're wrong. I agree with you. You know, it should have been handled a hell of a lot better than it was, but it's just that's how I interpreted it.
I mean, it's not terrible, and I think your point is valid. I think my interpretation of that was it was almost like somebody said to the writer, "Okay, look, you're writing these characters, but we can't just write them as if they just leapt from how many years ago till now. Things have happened to them. They're being pulled back into the situation, so you have to sort of write where they are now, so we can see that some time has passed, etc." And I think that's more or less mission accomplished. But again, I think the overall effect is a tiny bit of caricature, but not a lot. I mean, and that's more something that I think I sort of feel after years of watching it, as opposed to maybe it jumping out at me the first few times. I mean, I do remember kind of feeling like Spock was a little like much. The other two probably took me a little while before I kind of started to, do I like this or not like it? But for the most part, I think it works. But yeah, I mean, I think the overall effect it still works.
I agree. It in the end, judging this movie on its own, let's take it away from Star Trek for a second, because we do have to kind of judge it as is, as opposed to what it is. I mean, and it's hard. It is very hard not to bring along the yoke of sorts that is the original series. You know, as the Trek fans that we are, you know, we know all these things about these characters. So it's kind of like, yeah, okay, we get it. Yes, we know. We know these are the way that they are. But, you know, I like to give a little bit of credit to the idea that they were just trying to do it easy.
Yeah. Plus again, you got 2 hours to fill. I mean, you as opposed to doing just an episode of Star Trek, you got 2 whole hours. So let's explore their personalities a little bit. So that works.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And they got 2 hours and 12 minutes to be exact.
There you go. This is right. Not a short movie either. And by the way, I also do feel that the conclusion for me works pretty well as well. I kind of feel like that's an odd one, and I think a lot of people might have walked away from the whole Decker being absorbed into the energy, etc. I kind of feel like the more I look back on it, it does kind of make logical sense. Well, I should probably put big finger quotes around logical sense. I'm not saying that him physically being absorbed into the energy of the whatever. But I mean, as far as the progression of the character, I sort of feel like this was it ends up being sort of a logical progression of Decker's character. I mean, he's sort of a man without a ship now. He's a man without a mission. And plus he's sort of in love with the Ilea character, who he looks at as sort of being in there somewhere. So the fact that he would it's kind of like the sort of 3-way merge with Decker, V'ger, and Ilea, or what is left of her, etc. So I kind of felt like, again, looking probably years ago, I might have rolled my eyes a little bit, but now I kind of feel like, no, I think it works. I really do. It does kind of make some sense to me. And it's almost like once you leave there, Decker and Ilea are gone, and you sort of see the energy field sort of go away, and now you're left with just the Enterprise sort of floating away with its original crew intact. It's like, yeah, I kind of get it. I'm with this. So I kind of feel like that. Again, these are good writers. I have to say, it is, like you said, it is awkwardly written as sort of like just one long episode, but I do think that things fall together appropriately. So I like it, and I like how it's sort of handled as, again, sort of slow burn sci-fi.
Get us back in impulse power. Full reverse.
Wormhole distortion has overloaded the main power systems.
Well, how much do you like it, sir?
Now, this is where things are going to get a little tricky. I will absolutely admit, I am wondering how to score this, because I particularly when I compare it to the rest of the franchise, and when I'm talking about the franchise where Kirk is the main player.
Mm-hmm.
It's as far as I'm concerned, we're looking at a series of 6 films. Before we kind of get off into different territories with different other treks, etc. So I kind of feel like I don't know. I guess I'm going to settle on an 8. On one hand, I feel like it sort of feels like a 7, but then I'm like, how could I possibly give this thing a 7 after I just raved about it for a whole hour? It sets its sights fairly level. I sort of feel like, again, this is a film that's not trying to reinvent the wheel. It's not trying to redefine Star Trek. It is just taking classic Trek and putting a different sheen on it. So I kind of feel like the level of ambition, even though it seems to slap you in the face as far as the effects and things like that, it really does try to just keep in that episodic Star Trek television universe, just with a different sheen. So yeah, I think an 8, I guess, is probably pretty justified. I think everything on it more or less works. But again, it is meant to be. This is a film to be savored. It's not an action ride. It is not a roller coaster. I wouldn't even call it a 3-act structure. But what it gives you is pretty damn good. So, all right, yeah, I'll settle on an 8.
I'm glad to hear that, because I also settled on an 8.
All righty. Tell me about it.
I shall tell you about it. This is an underappreciated movie in all of Star Trekdom, and I feel like this was the right time to quote unquote rediscover it, because with the way modern Trek is going, where it has become this Kelvin timeline-esque arena of action and hyper this and so on and so forth, and running around hallways and everything like that, this is a reminder of what made the original show so enjoyable to me, because there was nothing like it. And it was bold to try to replicate that for the big screens. But, again, just like they always say, there's a difference between, back then there was always this big difference between movies and TV. And I think that with reviewers, the burden of the original show was too much for this. I feel like that had this just been, a regular movie with unrelated to Star Trek, maybe it wouldn't have gotten as maligned as it did. There was a lot of cliche about what Star Trek and what a Star Trek fan was back in those days. It was not a badge of honor to be called a Star Trek fan back in those days. It was not. You have no idea just how, not vilifying, that's not the right word. It was, it was just you didn't say it out loud. It was like,
it was get a life, will you, people?
Yeah, pretty much. And that was before he even did the get a life thing. But this was really, really pleasant and enjoyable and soothing, like that nice cup of coffee you have after a wonderful meal. That's what this was like to me. It was reminding me of just what made the original Star Trek so great. The cerebralness, the conversation. There was so little technobabble in this movie. I almost forgot how much I enjoyed when they didn't rely on technobabble. So much so.
Yeah.
All the actors, bring their best to the part. They shine in each of their moments. And it is not appreciated nearly as much as it is. If you call yourself a Star Trek fan that's not a fan of the current incarnation of Star Trek in the Picards and the Discoveries and stuff like that, you owe yourself a rewatch of this one to get an idea of what we could have had if.
Well said.
Yeah, sometimes it's the best you can come up with. All right, I think this week I shall start with Who Asked You?
Alrighty.
I actually don't have a lot to complain about with this movie, except for the change in the uniforms, and not all the uniforms. I thought that the uniforms that they wore for, say, engineering, the fact that they're basically wearing radiation suits now to work in engineering is kind of one of those things that, like, there's an OSHA violation right there that I should have thought of. But, that made sense to me. I liked the way Spock's exo costume when he went flying into V'ger to mind meld with him and everything. I like that. I thought that was great. But the silver outfits themselves with that weird ass buckle, and I swear to you, every time I saw Shatner take a step, I swear to you, I felt it. It's like he was like, I don't like this outfit. This feels weird, and it goes up in really weird places in my butt. I was not a big fan of the costuming. It was like, the one thing I liked about the original show is, like, yeah, it had that 60s kitsch look to it, but at least, it still held a level of almost military garb that I appreciated. And this didn't feel like military garb. This felt like the costumes from frickin' Stallone's Judge Dredd movie, by that, Calvin Klein or whoever the hell it was, Jean-Paul Gaultier, I think it was, who could design the costumes for that. Just way too over the top and too, yeah. That's me. If I could change anything, I would have had them go to the uniforms that they started using in Wrath of Khan from the beginning.
Yeah, that makes sense. I it's funny. I used to feel exactly the same way. I used to feel like I hated the silver costumes, loved the Wrath of Khan costumes, but I think over time I've kind of gotten lukewarm over the red Wrath of Khan look. Not really sure why that is, but I guess after watching now the Kelvin movies where they kind of go back to the original colors, at least, I kind of say to myself, maybe they should have just done that all along. I don't know, but anyway. But with that said, I kind of struggled really also to find anything. In fact, I almost settled on, when they're in the little shuttles going to the Enterprise, I could never understand why they couldn't get the effect right of Kirk and Scotty inside the shuttle. It almost looked like they sort of wrapped the picture of the two of them around it, so it didn't fit right.
Yeah.
I remember always kind of saying to myself, what a weird, simple little effect to get wrong. But anyway, what I will settle on is I can never stand the look of Vulcan. I remember thinking they just kind of, like, that was a moment where, again, now they have money for special effects, so let's just go crazy and have funky, crazy moons in the background and like lava or whatever. There was way too much going on in sort of the bigger establishing shots. Like, I remember kind of cringing a little bit and saying, I wish they could sort of do that over again.
You know what? I'll give you that. I mean, out of curiosity, when you rewatched, did you watch the original or the director's cut?
That's a great question. I probably have been watching the director's cut.
All right, because if you watch the original, Vulcan is just like this, flat wasteland and everything like that. The director's cut, they kind of Star Wars re-released, background effects to it.
Gotcha.
So that could be why you're thinking that way. Because originally it was just kind of like a barren land that he was out in, and then he just kind of walked over to a statue where T'Pol was waiting for him with the colon.
Yeah, that rings a bell. Okay, all right, very good.
Yep, but still, I agree with you. I feel like I don't feel like we have gotten a good representation of Vulcan in any form as of yet. I don't know if this place is a desert planet or a giant city. Who the hell knows? They haven't said.
True.
For your consideration, sir.
Am I going first here? Well, boy, there's a lot that I want to talk about because again, there's so much I really like about it. I sort of feel like the general ambiance of the film is kind of in a lot of ways, the thing I really want to sort of highlight. I guess if I have to just sort of settle on one thing, I'm going to settle on the score. And I kind of feel like the score was a little ahead of its time, frankly. And I think that's kind of obvious with the, again, how they ended up using it later for TNG. TNG.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I remember at the time, and I think at the time I wasn't crazy about it, because I kind of went, well, that's not the Star Trek theme. They have a theme. Use the theme. And this was so distinctive that I remember feeling like, well, but this is good music, but it's not Star Trek. And so I don't really, I think it bugged me at the time, but now I sort of just kind of have to pay respects to it. I think it's really is an incredible score. And again, there are a lot of times in the film where the score is carrying a lot of what's happening. So I'll give it to that.
I'll not only agree with you, but I will point out that was also for your consideration.
Nice.
But before I get to that, before I go into my little diatribe, I want to throw out a couple of special mentions. I feel Robert Wise needs to get some credit here. I mean, this was a huge director, dipping his toes into something, that he had really never done before. And if you sometimes look at some of the still photos of the scenes from this movie, there is a lot of beautiful shots in this movie. So I don't know who the cinematographer was, and I probably should have looked that up. So I apologize for not doing that, because that's probably the bigger one. But I want to give it to Robert Wise for taking this on, and you know what, for kind of making it work. Even in spite of everything else, I feel like he made it work. By the way, the cinematography was Richard H. Klein. He also deserves some credit. I want to throw that out there as well.
Yeah.
The second name I want to mention, Douglas Trumbull, for his outstanding visual effects.
Yeah. Agreed there. Yes. I really, I'm with you there 100%. And again, I love the effort that was put into making the ship and the whole world feel real. I think that's a big part of why I get such a charge out of this movie.
I completely agree with you there. With regards to Jerry Goldsmith, I feel exactly what you're saying about how I didn't appreciate it as much as at the time. And I'm going to use kind of a modern day example. So after we watched WandaVision on Friday, we all kind of felt like watching a Marvel movie. So we threw on the first Avengers. And here we are on the first Avengers, and I'm like flashing back to when it was one of the first movies I took Liam to see on the big screen and everything like that. He was 9 years old when it first came out. And, I was just having these great little memories. And it's funny how, as I was listening to the music, I was thinking to myself, man, I actually remember feeling to myself that, wow, Silvestri, you just kind of did okay. I said Alan Silvestri's now iconic soundtrack for the Avengers was just okay when it first came out. And now you can't even think of those. No, da, 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 da. What is that? That's the Avengers. There you go.
It's so funny you say that, because I felt very much the same way. I felt like I think by the time the last two Avengers came out, I was like, wow, did it take me this long to warm up to this music, or is he doing something different? Because I remember it feeling like at first it just felt like very generic superhero-ish music. Now I'm with you 1,000%. It feels very iconic, and again, did I warm up to it, or did they do something different? I don't know, but yeah, I get what you're saying.
Sometimes they say first impressions are lasting impressions, and I'm going to go ahead and disagree with that, because I have seen that as I've gotten older, I have been able to look back on things that at first I would be like, it was okay. But then in retrospect, I could be like, no, you know what? Now I appreciate it. Sometimes the initial impressions, especially when it comes to film and to a lesser extent TV. So yes, I absolutely was missing Alexander Courage's original main theme. Who wouldn't? It's an iconic theme. Yeah. But Goldsmith infused even the slowest scenes with just the right amount of melody and music to not overpower what you were seeing, but to just kind of prop up. Well, maybe not prop up. Maybe more like, maybe we're like, if you want to say that those scenes are an old lady crossing the street, Goldsmith was like the Boy Scout who just held his arm out for her and just gently walked across the street with her.
Well said.
Yeah, seriously, Goldsmith, sometimes I feel like doesn't get enough credit for all the soundtracks that he's done. And one of these days, we should just do a whole retrospect just on his music, and I guarantee you it would take an episode.
Nice. Good idea.
This, then, is the epic journey of the Starship Enterprise, traveling to the outer limits of time and space to challenge a vast, living machine of destruction. The human adventure is just beginning. Star Trek, the motion picture.
And thus ends our review of Star Trek, the motion picture. Shockingly, we liked it a lot. You know, you'd think we'd fall in with the cliche, but gosh darn it, that was some good Trek there.
Seriously, you're not kidding. For a film that kind of became the awkward stepchild of the franchise, yeah, we both really enjoyed it.
My feeling is that it'll be Star Trek V that'll be the really deserving of maligning.
Oh, yes.
But we haven't gotten there yet, folks, because next week, Con! I think that's all that needs to be said.
I agree. Looking forward to that one. That'll also be an interesting one.
Agreed. Especially with this maturity of us, so to speak. You know, what were we when Wrath of Khan came out? We were like 12 years old, each of us, for God's sakes. At that point, it's like, yeah, man, go ahead, blow them up. Look at us now. And we're like, we missed the days of such subtlety and characterization and story and
right? Seriously, can't please everybody,
especially as you get older. Hey, man, thank you for your patience with me this week. And listen, good luck with your move as well. Ladies and gentlemen, head of section, our Joe, he's moving, and he's still doing this show. When does he sleep?
It's not easy. I'll be glad when this is all over. But thank you, my friend. Another good review, and I will see you here next week. Thanks for listening to the Reviews Without Remorse podcast with Joe and Dave. Join us here every Thursday for a new episode. And be sure to check out the Reviews Without Remorse channel on YouTube for spoiler-free reviews of new releases. If you enjoyed this podcast, please consider becoming a patron. You can find our page on patreon.com. As little as $1 a month goes a long way. All clips in this podcast are used for commentary and critique, and is considered fair use. No copyright infringement is intended.
Get a life, will you, people? I mean, for crying out loud, it's just a TV show. I mean, look at you. Look at the way you're dressed. You've turned an enjoyable little job that I did as a lark for a few years into a colossal waste of time.